Hello, beautiful people. Hopefully I am properly audible to all of you. Please let me know in the chat. By the way, I see John Skis in the house. You caught that awesome music that opened all of this, provided by Cyberpunk Internal Affairs. Check out his channel. He does all kinds of great stuff with music. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm having one of my few cigarettes of the day, so I'm in a cheerful mood, and I am preparing to take a look at news from regions that bear on the conflict in Ukraine. However, this is not so much about the fighting that's going on there. There are all kinds of sources of information regarding that, many of them from people who actually have military experience rather than simple, geostrategic speculation backgrounds. So yeah, we're going to be taking a look at some things going on with energy in Europe. We're going to be taking a look at a couple things about that. We'll be taking a look at Bulgaria, perhaps Romania as well, but I really wanted to follow up and take a look at places like Bulgaria and Serbia vis-a-vis recent elections in Montenegro. Bulgaria had recent elections. There were some elections, I believe, in Kazakhstan. So basically, we left off on one of the last streams where I looked at the situation going on in this wider area, which is a long theme. People who followed my channel for a while will know this. Certainly, as it regards the Ukraine war, there are 5 or 6 videos now looking at this wider area. So I wanted to come back to all of it since some of these elections have happened, and so yeah, the time has come to check these things out. Before we get started, please do follow this channel, Semiagog. There's also the sister channel, A Safer Space, which has a whole bunch of old content on it, some of which is timeless. You can check that both channels out on YouTube as well as on BitChute. But please, peoples, do follow me on Odyssey, because there is no telling as we roll towards 2024 what's going to be happening. Please do follow me on Twitter. Please do follow me on Telegram. I'm also on Gab. I want to thank the wonderful people who support this channel, the Praetorian Chads who make it possible. I need to go back and check over on GoFundMe and Subscribestar, make sure that there are not any new names that I'm missing. If that is the case, I apologize. Thank you all very, very much for supporting the channel. Please do buy my books. It's time to shill, ladies and gentlemen. This is Vinculum. This is a story of a book thief in Istanbul in the year 2076, and pursued by remorseless corporate hitmen and an esoteric sect of assassins. He's tasked with obtaining a particular book. That's Vinculum. You can find that on Amazon. The link is in the description below. There's also my collection of poems. I expect most of you are fucking Philistines and will not appreciate poetry, but for those that do, there is Cinders from the Bloomery of Youth under the name Oliver Timken-Perrin. You can find this volume of poems available over on Amazon as well. The link is in the description below. Hopefully there is nothing else that I am forgetting. A shout out to my friends in the Old Glory Club. I am an ally and support them. Check out their stuff on Twitter. Check out their stuff on YouTube as well. Many of those folks are my friends. I now have between 4 and 5 cigarettes a day, so those individual cigarettes, they taste so good. But I must close down upon my addiction. I must seize control of my existence. Okay, so let me just quickly take a look here at the chat to make sure that everything is coming through all right with the... Okay, it sounds like Freedom Gaming is saying that it sounds good. John Ski is trying to make fun of me. No apple juice this evening. I need to go buy whiskey tomorrow. See 99 Iron Duke in the house. Hello, sir. Guy from V. Raging Mandrill. One of the OGC crew. You are welcome to post a link to y'all's stuffuses here in the chat. That won't bother me at all, Mandrill, since I don't have one handy. Oh, man. Okay, so let's get started. For those of you Uh, for those of you who are familiar with this, you'll know that I've taken a look at Bulgaria. I've taken a look at Moldova, which we're going to look at again tonight. Sometimes at Romania, apparently the seat of the NATO Black Sea Command, and certainly an important spot for NATO's management of its ongoing proxy war in Ukraine, or its involvement there in the civil war in Ukraine, I should say. I also look at places like Georgia, at Azerbaijan and Armenia, at Kazakhstan, at Serbia and Montenegro as a related element there. More broadly, it also helps at times to take a look at Belarus and at Poland, but I will not be doing that this evening. The main idea is, the main background for all of this has to do with Prometheanism, an idea that was a strategic approach that was put together by one Polish field marshal and statesman, Piłsudski. I would recommend that everybody take a look at the channel. You can find videos that I've done on that, 3 thus far, if I'm remembering correctly. The core people for that are Prudentialist and Charlemagne. I recommend both their channels. Both gentlemen are members of the Old Glory Club as well. And in any case, definitely check out their stuff. They're regulars on my channel and good guys. But check out the streams on Prometheanism. As I said, Prude and Charlemagne are kind of core for that. We had a certain MS join us for one of those, and I'm very happy to say that's the case. I'm also very happy to say that we had Apostolic Majesty on, or I did, in order to help with historical context. Of course, he's well qualified to assist with that, certainly. Okay. So background on this, to understand why I'm looking at all these separate countries scattered around Ukraine, it's because the basic strategy of the West is to go after Russia via Ukraine and in Ukraine, but also to go after many of its other holdings or former holdings, places like Georgia, whether that be under Russia, the Russian Empire, or the Soviet Union, makes no matter. But Georgia, Azerbaijan, Moldova, areas of former Bessarabia, Belarus, which now seems to be firmly in their grip at the moment. Anyway, so that's why we're looking at these other countries, because everybody's looking at what's going on the battlefield, but I want to see how the countries in the region are behaving in order to see how they're measuring things. The behavior of the leaders of those various countries, the decisions they make, the things they opt also, for example, not to do. All of these things can kind of provide us with a read for how the broader attack of the West on Russia is going. And the associated attempts to wrest countries that were once within its sphere of control free of it, mainly for purposes of energy. But before we get into all of that, and we will, I want to throw up a tweet here that I dealt with sometime. I put up recently, sometime back, short time back, I should say. Let me get over here to my profile and I'll just read from it. Basically, it's my best guess for what is going on with this whole business with Ukraine and the rest. Basically, asking the cui bono question, the who benefits question regarding the war in Ukraine. To a certain extent, yes, the United States does. But likewise, its standing on the world stage has suffered greatly, and I believe will continue to suffer. And at the same time, okay, this is taking me forever. Surely I should have found it by now. Apologies for not being prepared in this respect, peoples. So the United States, you would imagine, oh yeah, they can sell LNG to Europe. They continue to impose their will upon Europeans. They show it's kind of like a satrapy for the United States, or a series of satrapies managed by a intermediary in Brussels. But the United States is running into real problems as a result of this, particularly from things like the Nord Stream events, the recent unpleasantness surrounding Nord Stream 2 and 1. I can't even remember exactly what all happened there. But I think that's a delayed detonation on that. I think it's just a matter of time before the Germans finally say, you know what, fuck all of you. I know that they have serious problems there, but their heavy industry in general has been hit. Their energy's been hit, and they've been forced to kind of take a backseat to the polls in many respects. And what self-respecting Teuton would enjoy that? So this is the tweet I put out to give you a general idea of what I'm thinking for the this is my working hypothesis. Your mileage may vary. I'm not making any claims. It's highly speculative, but for me, it's a beginning, the beginnings of a picture that help me to get some sense of what's going on, that accounts for the facts that I see in front of me, and has the fewest question marks, as I put it. So my current working hypothesis: what's going on in Ukraine greatly benefits China at the long-term expense of the United States. Biden and his handlers, in my view, according to this hypothesis, not the only hypothesis, but my favorite at present. According to this hypothesis, Biden and his handlers are Chinese cat's paws in this. If we ask cui bono, who benefits regarding Ukraine, the answer is China. Why is that, you ask? Well, because all the business going on with China and Ukraine introduces new energy and supply routes for China. China and Russia are both, competing hegemons, as they like to say, for the Asian landmass. And China has become more powerful economically and is developing its military technology. And so the Russians would have to be a little, hanky about passing off, their higher tech stuff to China, because it will be replicated there. And Russia has to know that at some point, at many points in the future, and indeed it's happened in the past, they're going to come into conflict in terms of their national interests, economic interests, energy interests, security interests with China. But this Ukraine thing, as many, many people have observed, I'm not spouting this as a hot take, the events in Ukraine have basically pushed Russia straight into China's arms. And that has allowed China to begin to secure energy that does not require it to take to the high seas, where it is susceptible to interdiction from the United States, massive blue water navy. And a lot's been made of hypersonic missiles and how that can take out carriers, but the fact remains, not saying that's not true, by the way, but the fact remains that the United States Navy, particularly its submarines, are still enormously powerful. And if there's anything that they can handle, it's shutting down shipping. Certainly. Try hitting submarines with hypersonic missiles. So there are real problems in terms of China's strategy, its dual strategy, the one belt, one road business, and its business of the string of pearls, the island chains and the rest, as it attempts to, push a blue water navy out there and establish bases in places like Djibouti and the rest. So now Russia and China have been pushed together, and China's in a much better situation because Russia needs China at this point for a variety of reasons. And in order to cut a deal with the Chinese, the inscrutable Chinese, Russia has basically agreed to provide their necessary energy, and it's not susceptible to interdiction, which means now there's a fight to have trade routes and energy routes cross Asia. And for those who followed my channel for a long time, you've seen me talk about this. You've seen my late friend Tim Rudisil talk about it many times. And so we're back with the business of how routes will go across Europe. And this is going to bear on us taking a look at some new energy moves that Europe is making. It's also going to go back to questions that we've looked at many times in the past, like potentially crossing Afghanistan, parts of Pakistan. How will China get across Asia to Europe if it wants to do it in a more secure way where it's not susceptible to naval interdiction? So one set of routes would go across Russia. Now it's in Russia's best interests to make those arrangements with China, not entirely hat in hand, but in a situation of more extreme circumstances and crisis than they would otherwise be in. So China can run its way across Russia to a certain extent, but it's also going to want to run still beneath Russia across Asia, which underscores why Russia continues to work its relationship with India. Because if you connect Russia and India, then there's just a little narrow passage in between where things like the Wakhan corridor and the rest, where China could thread the needle and get through to places like Iran. But now we're seeing things heat up from Iran and Azerbaijan in terms of getting from there all the way over the rest of the way to Europe. And that's where the Black Sea comes in, questions about the Caspian, and of course things like the Lachin corridor in the Caucasus, particularly the South Caucasus, where everyone should be ready and expecting for all sorts of shit to continue to develop. We're going to be looking at that closely. So again, China's the one that benefits from the Ukraine shit. And so, we've seen plenty of stuff suggesting, I'm of course not saying it's true. I don't want to have problems with my channel. This is all sheer speculation, but it's at least something that we could entertain without a shred of actual support, other than any number of allegations in news articles and things like that appeared once upon a time. We can imagine that Biden and his family have really good connections with China, and we know that China prefers to do things economically. China likes to go after other countries and not do it in a military way. You can look all the way back to the Xiongnu and dealing with hairy steppe barbarians. What do the Chinese do? They'll give them some silk. They won't give them silkworms, but they'll give them some silk. They might even pawn off one of their extra princesses and give them to the nomads in exchange for good relations and maybe getting some good horse breeding stock. That's what they do. That's how they do it. They do not want a direct confrontation. They are a mercantilist Confucian nation, to pull an old Steve Bannon that you guys might have heard from back in the day. So it makes perfect sense that the Chinese would seek to subvert our government with money in order to have happen what it wants to happen. And so I think that's probably what's going on here. And why do older powers in the United States not step up and block this immediately? Well, because the military-industrial complex wants to sell weapons. Some people talk about how prostitutes and prostitution is the oldest profession. I have asserted that it may well be that war is the oldest profession, older even than whoring. And so you've got a military-industrial complex, and they're in a beautiful position. I've observed it. Many others have observed it, that we're in a situation now where everybody's been forced to dump their arms from the old Warsaw Pact days, as well as all kinds of stuff from the earlier days in NATO of the Cold War. And they're getting rid of all those Leopard 1s. They're even, peeling off a few older Abrams tanks, a few older Leopard 2s, sending all that shit into Ukraine, where it gets chewed up and spit out. And now everybody has to buy new stuff. So it makes sense that the military-industrial complex would say, is it in our best interest for somebody like Biden to get us involved in a land war in Asia with Russia? Well, maybe not in the long term, but in the short term, that's a lot of fucking money. And they got to be looking there saying, man, the technocrats made an enormous amount of money with their little game they played recently with healthcare and all the games they're playing about green stuff and green energy. So the technocrats just, carried home mountains of gold with printing new money to pay for all the stuff that happened with VAGS regimes and the rest. The military-industrial complex has got to be thinking to itself, well, why should these be the only ones who make money? Why should these guys be the only ones who do it? Let's show them a thing or two about how it really works. You want to talk about real money? Let's get all of these defense budgets from all of these different countries pumping, and we can make money hand over fist. So China secures energy and supply routes while no longer having to worry about Russian influence in Europe, because the Russians basically been kicked out of Europe. And with the things like Nord Stream that I mentioned earlier, it's likely that we will see U.S. influence wane there in at least the outside end of the medium term and long term. So it suits the military-industrial complex in the short term and the beginning of the medium term. It suits China in the medium term and long term. And I think what's happening basically is the military-industrial complex has allowed Biden to do this in an enough rope to hang himself kind of way. As I said, the Chinese encourage it for their own reasons, and as a sort of superficial surface feature, I guess that's redundant. The actual motivations of the individual people within the Biden, Obama, Newland, those kind of people within that orbit, I think that they're really just, swinging at the usual pinatas of greed and power. So what I'm saying here is not that necessarily all of the people in Biden's circle under this hypothesis, for which I have no proof, don't nuke my channel. But under this hypothesis, we could imagine that the Bidens and Newland and the like are telling themselves that that this really suits them as well. They'll go after Russia. They hate Russia. They can open up Eastern Europe. They can make tons of money. But in the end, it's probably being supported, in my opinion, by China as well, and being tolerated by the military-industrial complex. I think that eventually the deeper military-industrial complex will treat Biden as a stool pigeon, perhaps as soon as this next election, as a fall guy for all of this. As I said, having emptied half the world of old military hardware and signed contracts to replace all of it, the time has come. The benefits of allowing this to persist are very likely now going to be eclipsed by the negative aspects. The other angle on this hypothesis of mine is that all this talk of, the U.S., going after China and being willing to go to war over Taiwan, I think it's all bullshit. I think it's all bullshit. We might find out it's not, but for the time being, it seems as though it suits American and Chinese interests to make it seem like shit's going to break out there. For the U.S. interests, the military-industrial complex can, gee golly, do more things with the Pacific Fleet, talk about how more U.S. taxpayer money has to be spent on this, but they can also sell tons of shit to Taiwan. For China, they love it. I don't think they give a shit. You could send McCarthy over there, or I'm sorry, Pelosi over there, and have McCarthy talk to Taiwanese envoys. They don't give a shit, because what it does is it creates the perspective that China is equally under attack by the West in the way that Russia is, which makes it seem a much more natural fit, what I refer to as the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but as a trap. So under this hypothesis, it suits China and the United States to make it seem like shit could break out there as well. It does seem likely that there will be a military-industrial complex pivot to talk about China as the great threat. I think they will pivot to that because it suits them to take more taxpayer money and to create a sort of bipolar arrangement, what some people are calling, Cold War II. So there are aspects of this I don't have time to go into as regards to the hypothesis, but I think basically we're seeing healthcare, global commie, one world government, green technocrat types on one side, and we are seeing old school military industrial complex, industrial capacity, and energy concerns on the other. And in some respects, what they're doing overlap, but I think that they're going to come to loggerheads at a certain point. And for the military-industrial complex, because war is the oldest business, they need this whole idea of uniting all under heaven to go away for a little while in order to create a situation where you've got two major global blocks and it's divided, because then they'll be forced to reintroduce industrial capacity in the West in order to back, the production of arms and the development of, next generation fill in the blank hypersonic missiles, energy weapons, whatever. So I think eventually you're going to see the military industrial complex come out on top. And my guess is that your Elon Musks, your Trumps, and your Tucker Carlsons are more backed by the military industrial complex than for example, your Mark Zuckerbergs and your Bill Gates and your Joe Bidens, who are on the other side of things with the desire to unite all under heaven with a sort of, to some extent, Chinese supported game of gutting various institutions and wearing them like a skin suit in order to bring it together, uniting all under heaven. So, yeah, the last piece to that, just so people understand it, or hopefully can understand at least part of what this hypothesis is about. If you have one world government, then you have manufacturing shared everywhere and parts shared and military production shared in many respects, which makes it very hard to keep secrets and keep an edge. And so they need us to go back for a time to highly polarized Cold War II kind of arrangement, simply because they need to bring production capacity back to the West and develop that production capacity in such a fashion that it doesn't leak like a sieve in terms of IP security and industrial espionage, military espionage, and the rest. And again, I do want to say that, for the likes of Biden and Newland themselves personally, those people individually are probably stupid enough to believe that they had a chance to defeat Russia in all of this, or a good chance. And they probably also believe that they really are antagonizing China as they do the various things that they're told to do by their handlers. And people like Pelosi and McCarthy meet with the Taiwanese and the rest. Obviously, all of this is very speculative, except for the cui bono part with China. I think you can very solidly make a case that China is the real winner in what's going on now in Ukraine. I mean, you can take a look at how all the focus there has left an opening for China to come in and negotiate what looks like a peace arrangement or some sort of rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They're also planning to broker some things apparently with Turkey, quite possibly to get involved in some things in Syria. And there's also the business with China talking about things like coming in and helping to negotiate a settlement in Israel between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So you can clearly see how they're stepping up as the new soft power guys, moving behind the scenes to actually get things done so everyone can get back to business again. And I think Biden has been central to their plan, and that raises all sorts of questions about who really pulls his strings. But we'll leave it at that. Let's jump over, ladies and gentlemen, to what we've got here with this stuff I want to review. The first thing I want to talk about, let me see if I can get this up onto screen. Okay, this should be visible. The first thing I want to show here is this aggregate EU mechanism that was recently announced. Now, I am not an economics guy, right? So be aware that be aware of that fact. I don't pretend to be an economics guy. Half this shit confuses me, more than half of it. And right before this stream started, I'm asking people like Turnip and others and putting out questions on Twitter to try to get my head around all of this. But basically, the EU has come up with an API called Prism. Actually, let me get over to that really quickly. Good luck for anyone who wants to figure out what Prism is all about. You can go to this website, or I'm sorry, Prisma. I've tried to look at their information on the phases of a tender process for aggregate EU and how it all works. I can't make much sense of it, but for anyone who wants to go look up Prisma in the European Union and this idea of aggregate EU. But and here, let's jump to an article about it first, right? Prisma European Capacity Platform GmbH is glad to announce that the first round of demand aggregation and tendering of aggregate EU will be launched 25th of April 2023. This will help to pool the gas demand from European companies in order to jointly purchase gas and ensure security of supply for this winter, the next winter that's coming. Clearly, they view the next winter that's coming as a potential problem, and they're trying to get out ahead of it. The European Union wants to guarantee a stable supply while keeping energy prices low. Therefore, the European Commission created the EU Energy Platform with the aim to play a key role in pooling demand, coordinating infrastructure use, negotiating with international partners, and preparing for joint gas and hydrogen purchases. Interesting, hydrogen. Aggregate EU is the service that aims to aggregate gas demand from companies established in the EU or in energy community countries and match it with the most competitive supply offers in time for the next storage filling season. Sorry, storage filing? I think it's filling. So, it's developed and operated by Prisma under a service contract with the Directorate General for Energy of the European Commission. So there's a lot of blah blah blah. The important point here is EU countries are required, which presumably means it's not voluntary, are required to aggregate demand for volumes of gas equivalent to 15% of their respective gas storage filling obligations. I'm guessing that that's something having to do with how all the countries in the EU, even if they don't need to fill storage, right? The whole reason they have to fill storage is because they don't have a steady flow. They no longer have the access to the Russian energy. Many of them don't. And so particularly countries like Germany have to store it beforehand. And I don't understand all of this. This 15%, I think, is 15%. Basically, it's forcing them to get on board in the beginning with buying through this program in order for the filling of reserves. And those reserves probably have a lot more to do with certain countries than with others. So it's probably a way of making countries that really don't have a problem with energy, in the way that, for example, Germany does. It's a way of forcing them on board to form, I guess, something, as best I can understand it, like a monopsony or oligopsony or a buyer's cartel, probably something most like a buyer's cartel from what people are telling me. But beyond that 15%, the aggregation will be voluntary, but based on the same mechanism. Well, when you look at Prisma, the goal is to increase transparency and to reduce quote unquote uncoordinated purchases, meaning they don't want anybody out on the edges cutting their own deal and fucking with their attempts to fix prices and the rest. And the important thing to understand about this is that any links or ownership with Russian entities, will exclude you from this aggregate EU program. So if you look over here at suppliers worldwide, pipeline gas and LNG on the right-hand side, this circle to the far right, suppliers worldwide, pipeline gas and LNG, parentheses, excluding Russia, right? So they're playing some kind of game here. I think half of it is about getting everybody onto the same system so that they can track what's going on. The first step to granular control of everything is surveillance of it. And I think that that's a key thing about this Prisma system. Let me jump out of this momentarily. If you go over to Prisma and try to figure out what's going on with it, it apparently is an API. So, you tech guys can probably take a look at this and figure out more about what it is. But you do a search to try to figure out what it is. It just says, the Prisma API is a lightweight approach for shippers to request relevant data, right, and send their data from the Prisma platform, or to send their bids directly from their IT system. So basically, it seems like they're forcing them all into the same system. If you go over to this European Commission thing on energy to try to figure out what aggregate EU really is, good luck making sense of it. Aggregate EU is the name of the demand aggregation and joint purchasing service operated by Prisma, the service provider, under the EU Energy Platform in accordance with Council Regulation 2022-2576. Okay, that was really helpful. What is the objective of aggregate EU? Well, the objective is to contribute to the security of supply, both in terms of volume and affordability, with a focus on LNG. So apparently there's going to be a big focus here on buying LNG. And if I had to guess, a whole lot of that is probably going to come from the United States. So, if you have to fill a certain amount, 15% of your obligation to jointly stock up Europe with energy via this system, then apparently what this saying is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, people who understand this sort of shit better than I do. But apparently what you're going to end up with is this is a sort of camel's nose into the tent, right? Drive the wedge in a little bit, get your foot in the door. So now what it looks like is 15% of their obligation to stock the supply is going to have to come from LNG, and they're going to have some sort of buyer's cartel leverage to fix prices. Probably this is oriented also towards strengthening their attempts to price fix vis-a-vis Russia as well. But this is, I don't follow it that well. So they're probably, there's certainly many people who are listening who understand all of this better than I, who understand economics and energy and the rest. And you're probably sitting there, with your hand over your face saying, what the fuck is he talking about? I apologize for it. Anybody who understands it better, I welcome you to explain it for me and for the rest of us. I do see, however, that somebody, James Mary here, is saying the only major EU LNG ports are currently in Britain, which is causing all sorts of issues. I've looked at that in the past, and there are actually a number of them. Now, I note that you did say major ones, right? Which leaves aside others, but as best I can tell, there are quite a number of them. So these are largest liquefied natural gas import terminal projects proposed or under construction. These ones are coming in all over the place. And if you go back and look for existing ones, let's take a quick look here. Oh, hell. It's not going to be a quick search, but I remember seeing before that I believe Netherlands, if I remember correctly, maybe Spain too. This is as of 2018, so it's going to be very old. Give it a minute on my slow 4G connection to come up here. Maybe we'll get a quick view of it. Anyway, this isn't of major importance. I'm not just trying to nitpick with James Mary, but I believe that there are more significant LNG facilities in Europe that'll make it possible to bring energy in. So yeah, overview of LNG in Europe. Yeah, what's it say? All of Europe's LNG terminals are import facilities. There are currently, this is as of 2018, 28 large-scale LNG import terminals in Europe, including non-EU Turkey. There are also 8 small-scale LNG facilities in Europe, in Finland, Sweden, Germany, Norway, and Gibraltar. Of the 28 large-scale LNG import terminals, 24 are in EU countries. So that's of the large-scale one, and there are 24. 4 are in Turkey, 23 are land-based import terminals, and 4 are floating storage and regasification units. So anyway, again, not to get too heavy into this, but there is more going on with LNG import capacity in Europe. Okay, so anyway, that's just a basic thing. We should be aware of this. It says that they're concerned about energy. They're concerned about the coming winter, and they're trying to get more ahead of it than they were with this last year. It seems from everything I've been able to follow that the situation, the winter basically was much warmer than people had feared it might be, and so it wasn't as big a hit as it could have been for them. So clearly, they're concerned about the future possibility of problems here, and they're trying to do something about it. So energy security is a big deal, and I guess the other takeaway, as they like to say, the other thing that you should draw from this is that they do seem to continue to push to force everyone into their tent to do what they're told. which is not surprising at all given Brussels' track record. Okay, so another energy thing that we want to take a look at here is that European countries are going to boost gas imports from Azerbaijan. The national gas system operators of Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia agreed on within the last week or so to boost the transfer of natural gas from Azerbaijan using the existing infrastructure of their countries, which were until recently highly dependent on Russian energy. So they're trying to get out from underneath Russian energy, and they hope to do it with Azerbaijan, which should, for those of you who have IQs above 100, this should suggest why we're seeing problems in places like Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and why we'll see more of these problems going forward. But we'll come back to that in just a moment. So Azerbaijan's president, Ilham Aliyev, called the signing of the agreement between the European nations and the state oil company of the Republic of Azerbaijan a very timely step that would bring bigger and more secure gas supplies to many more countries in Europe. And they talk about this, following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, the European Union is trying to diversify European energy sources away from Russian gas. The EU signed a memorandum of understanding with Azerbaijan in July to double the volume of Azeri gas imports to 20 billion cubic meters per year by 2027. Quote, the war in Ukraine prompted us to look for new dimensions of the concepts of good neighborliness, mutual assistance, and solidarity. It has prompted us to look for entirely new, efficient solutions, new routes, and new modes of supply to redraw the international logistical map, Bulgarian President Rumen Radev said. Bulgaria will be a part of this. The idea is it's a multi-segment pipeline project to get natural gas from Azerbaijan to Italy through an interconnector with Greece. The connector allows for the delivery of 1 billion cubic meters of Caspian gas to Bulgaria, covering nearly 1/3 of the country's needs, and has capacity to increase the volume to up to 5 billion cubic meters annually. Now, this is relative to Bulgaria, but many other countries are involved, as we'll see. But I just want to point out here, I'm sorry about that. Is there any, let's make that image go away. Here, no, I can do this, so I don't have to look at that. Jesus fucking Christ. No matter where I scroll this thing, I've got to look at black babies or fucking Hasidim. Okay. Bulgaria is linked to the Southern Gas Corridor, a multi-segment pipeline project to get natural gas from Azerbaijan to Italy through an interconnector with Greece. Does anybody else notice here? We're going to get from Azerbaijan to Italy by way of Greece. Am I the only one saying, well, what about all that other territory they have to cross before that? And why does Euronews not mention it? That's interesting. Let's go look at another article about this. Bulgaria, Romania, part of deal to ensure Azeri gas flow to Europe. April 25th, the gas transmission system operators, TSOs, of Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia on Tuesday agreed to Azerbaijan's state-owned energy company SOCAR on additional volumes of Azeri natural gas to be delivered via their systems to the region and wider Europe. Now, it says promote energy cooperation in the context of the war in Ukraine. Let's see here. Important step in future. There we go. Hungary is working on a long-term contract to receive 2 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year from Azerbaijan, with pipelines in southeastern Europe key to transiting these deliveries. But again, how the fuck does it get to Greece? Interesting. Greece-Bulgaria interconnector. Again, Greece. Okay, Azerbaijan, are we getting somewhere now? Azerbaijan delivers gas from the Shah Deniz field to Europe via the Trans-Anatolian natural gas pipeline, TANAP. There we go. Turkey and to Greece, Albania, the Adriatic, and Italy. But you know what's weird? It doesn't talk about how Azerbaijan gets to Turkey. All right, well, let's look at this a bit further. Let's go take a look at what the Turks have to say about it on Daily Sabah. Azerbaijan's SOCAR seals pact for new supply route to Europe. State oil company of Azerbaijan inked a memorandum of understanding with Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary to send additional gas to Europe. So we have the The same diversifying energy resources. It makes it possible to expand Azerbaijan's national gas supply in Europe, strengthen Europe's energy security, all the same kind of shit that we always hear about. And we hear, oh, okay, now Georgia appears. Now we start to see a more complete picture. Today, Azerbaijani gas is exported to Georgia, Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Italy, and starting from this year, Romania. And it will, we plan to start gas supplies to Hungary and Slovakia too. That's all cool. Now we know that it's going to involve Georgia and Turkey. So let's take a look at some maps. Here's the old Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan pipeline, which, got its name expanded, right? And you can see how it runs across Azerbaijan and then it rolls over here into Georgia, right? But what if problems happen in Georgia? What if things don't go as well in Georgia as everyone imagines, in terms of EU accession and the rest? Well, you could run into some problems. Georgia could do things under influence from Russia and affect that. So maybe Azerbaijan should be looking for another route to make it over into Turkey. I wonder if they should be looking into that. I wonder if that explains why Azerbaijan, with support from Turkey and apparently from the European Union, also from Israel, is interested in taking this route to get its energy through. There's an interesting thing, though. Iran doesn't seem to be on board with this. And it's in much better relation these days with Russia, which means you've got a pincer here between Russia and Iran. So, Azerbaijan can try and push it through Armenia, but that's going to involve dealing with shit with the Lachin or Lachin corridor or whatever it's called, or hoping that things go well in Georgia. Georgia, we got some question marks about. We'll take a look at that. Armenia, there are a number of question marks. They have recently been behaving as though they are willing to go in the other direction, to basically turn loose of Russia and head for the European Union. But I think all of these countries, Turkey included, Armenia included, Georgia included, Azerbaijan less so, are waiting to see what the hell happens with the Black Sea vis-a-vis Russia and, well, with the Caucasus in general, with the Black Sea, and with Ukraine. They're all waiting, basically. I could have said this much more easily. All these countries are waiting to see what the fuck happens in Ukraine. And if Russia comes out victorious there, you're probably going to see Russia reassert itself here in these regions and in the Black Sea, at least as far as they can, with Turkey on the southern end of it, and Romania as a NATO kind of thing, right? But certainly Ukraine can be cut off. But that hasn't happened yet. We don't know. The West continues to imagine that it's going to be able to come out on top vis-a-vis Russia in Ukraine. And so they're pushing very hard in Georgia, very hard in Armenia, very hard in Azerbaijan to open up this route. And this route will also be interesting for China, though less so, because China is in a situation where they could attempt to connect to Iran via Afghanistan and then come through Iraq and Syria. So this is one potential route to the Black Sea. There's another potential route for trade and energy that interests China running south of here. This route right here, right now, is really about NATO, Europe, Turkey, and the United States trying to block Russia so that they can get energy options. And so this is where Russia cares the most. China has some other ideas down here. We'll see. Okay, we have one other map here, and this is the Tanap pipeline that they're really talking about doing for now, right? And this one doesn't involve having to do anything through Armenia. The problem is that, as we talked about, shit could go south with Georgia. And another issue, to be entirely blunt about it, is that, Turkey is a question mark in Turkey is a question mark in many respects vis-a-vis Europe. Yeah, they're in NATO, but look what they have done with migrant populations and how they've weaponized those. If they're in a situation where they're responsible for deciding to turn on or off the tap as regards all this stuff in Europe, I'm not entirely sure that we can say that that's really European energy security. it seems to me like it's more, I mean, this is Turkey and Greece, right? You could say, well, maybe it'll bring together Greece and Turkey to some extent because it's, everybody gets shekels in exchange for allowing the gas to flow. But still, I think the best way that we could construe this is that it's European energy security in relation to Russia, perhaps, but it introduces another person with their finger on the tap, or another group, another country with its ability to twist the knob and turn these things off. So we'll see. In any case, the gas coming from Azerbaijan is not sufficient to handle all of Europe's needs. They can expand it. They can get more going on. We'll see that there's some stuff going on now with Kazakhstan trying to come on board with this to bring more energy and to build tankers. We'll get to that in a bit, which could presumably cross the Caspian and then transit Turkey to Europe. The thing is that Iran, just like with the Caucasus, and Russia, just like with the Caucasus, are in a position to say no to ships doing things in the Caspian Sea. So all of this is, I don't know. I don't think it's as solid and as certain as anybody imagines, but keep an eye on it. So now we are ready to take a look at Bulgaria. But before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to step away for about 30 seconds, and I will be right back. Forgive me. Here, I will give you the first article to look at to entertain yourselves. And I will be back. No, I won't, because I have to explain that. Anyway, I will be back in 30 seconds. One moment. All right, apologies, ladies and gentlemen. So starting with Bulgaria, right? Bulgaria is important because it's on the Black Sea, and it has Black Sea coastline. It has all kinds of Danube River access. We're going to take a look. So yeah, Bulgaria, let's just scan the headlines briefly first, right? When you scan headlines like this, I do so because it allows me to get a picture of what they're trying to tell us, right? What they want us to think about all of this, right? And in this case, we can see Bulgaria to, realign railway to Romanian border. So that's infrastructure stuff. Youth organizations are saying that Romania and Bulgaria should accede to the Schengen zone. That's more EU integration. The rest we'll get to in a minute. Okay, so let's jump through the ones that I've already selected. We'll do this again with other countries, and it will be more fruitful than my attempt here. Okay, the first thing is we were waiting. We wanted to see what was going on with the election that happened just recently in Bulgaria. So I did a stream sometime back, and I said we're going to have to wait to see what happens there. Well, what happened, and it looks like another stalemate, right? So how will Bulgarian election impact country support for Ukraine? Which is, of course, all Voice of America would give a shit about. After a relatively low turnout of 40% in Bulgaria's parliamentary elections that were held on Sunday, results showed that there was no outright winner and the parties are headed to coalition talks. Well, that's not entirely true. The guy who's been prime minister several times and has been kicked in and out, he was kicked out by a whole crowd of EU shills. And they proceeded to talk all about how they're going to do anti-corruption shit and everything else. And this guy came back, what's his name? Boyko Borisov. And he said, fuck you very much, and fuck your anti-corruption stuff. I mean, he affects interests like anti-corruption and the rest in order to speak to the public. But he's basically, as best I can tell, he's a Bulgarian strongman with a very, very long history running things there, very often behind the scenes. They say there's no outright winner, but there was, because the top one is Borisov, who returned, and in a coalition with this other party, the SDS, they've got 26.51% of the votes, right? The reformists, the really just bald-faced EU shills, came in second with 25%. And then the third place is Revival. And let's jump over to Revival here. Did I miss that one? Revival is interesting to look at because it's called the Russophile Party, and it's in third place, and it jumped 5 percentage points more than last year. So you've got someone who is a canny, strongman kind of player, Borisov, and to whatever extent that he can partner with the pro-Russian Revival Party, then, you know, he's got close to 40% in parliament. So I think that there are things that he can do there. If you look here, I wanted to just, this is from another article. This one is from New Eastern Europe. Bulgaria's election spiral, the anatomy of disappointment. This is another, you know, person lamenting the fact that that the reformers didn't win and that Borisov did, and they just complain about how corrupt he is, as though there's anyone in fucking Bulgaria that isn't corrupt. Preposterous fantasizing and wank fest. But this is Revival, right? This pro-Russia party that's appeared there. Indeed, at first glance, the rise of the Revival Party raises concern for those believing in Euro-Atlantic values. The party engages in far-right rhetoric and advocates for Bulgaria's exit from the EU. Yet it is possible to imagine that Revival may simply be a controlled experiment by Bulgaria's status quo designed to help Borisov. It is already striking that media groups, traditionally friendly to Borisov, have persistently provided positive coverage for Revival while disseminating tarnishing, libelous content about PP and DB. Those are the reformists that came in second place. Basically, he's saying that, you know, it seems as though well, here, let me read it. A closer look at the far-right votes raises even more suspicions. One should not forget that Borisov's third government was a coalition with 3 far-right parties, the United Patriots Coalition, blah, 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 etc., that overtly promote xenophobia. Overtly promoting xenophobia. Say it isn't so. As visible in Table 2 below. At the March 2017 parliamentary election, these parties earned 318,000 votes together. As evident from the same table, these parties began participating in different configurations at parliamentary elections from 2021 onwards. While a comprehensive social survey is necessary to prove this point, it is clear that 318,513 Bulgarian citizens who believe in far-right narratives cannot simply disappear into thin air overnight. As a result, they probably cast their ballots for another party embracing their beliefs in the latest election. Coincidentally or not, at the April election, Revival obtained 358,174 votes. So it looks like Borisov has spun off this Revival Party in order to catch the right-wing and pro-Russia people and gather them up as part of a coalition. But the general picture that that we can take away from this whole business of Bulgaria and its recent election is that it is a kind of stalemate. And I think that part of it is that it suits Borisov and other power players in Bulgaria to continue to behave as though it's a stalemate, to just bide their time. Because, as I mentioned, I think what's going on is in a lot of these countries, what's happening is everybody's saying, what the fuck is going to happen in Ukraine? We don't know. It certainly doesn't look like Russia's losing, though. So I think everybody is waiting. They're coming up with every way to push it off, to delay it, to set it aside until the decision can be made later, because they do not want to get caught, for example, going all in with the West and then seeing Russia resurgent in the Ukraine, or at least parts of it, certainly in the South Caucasus and in the Black Sea. This could be very, very rough for them. And there is no doubt, as we'll see with further headlines about Moldova, that every flavor of fucking EU, Russian, NATO, and American spook is probably working overtime in many of these countries that we're discussing now. So they talk about it as being a stalemate. But again, I believe that what we're seeing here is that it suits everyone, even the pro-Western groups to a certain extent, not to put it all on the table here, because, you know, they could be left hanging, right? To the victor, the spoils. And which party is going to be victorious in the Ukraine, or which coalition, which of the competing coalitions is going to be victorious there, is not yet clear. So it looks like Borisov is in. They were not able to completely remove him. And you can be absolutely sure that every crooked, underhanded thing possible that NATO and the EU could do in Bulgaria, all speculation on my part, but I would say, in my opinion, according to my speculation, in my view, you can be absolutely sure that every kind of, you know, crooked, underhanded shit that the EU and NATO could get up to, they got up to in Bulgaria in order to see him lose. And he still came out ahead. And I think that's just home team advantage for crookedness. So bear that in mind. That is what's going on in Bulgaria. Otherwise, it's just a quick, you know, the kind of headlines you'd expect to see as they're trying to build a case for how Bulgaria needs to peel itself off of Russia. You know, Bulgaria accuses Russian ambassador of interfering in internal affairs. Apparently, a Russian ambassador came in and said that, you know, if she were Bulgarian, she would have voted for so-and-so. You're seeing stuff here like Bulgarian Foreign Minister Nikolai Milikov says his country is facing unprecedented hybrid attacks from Russia amid Moscow's military aggression against Ukraine. So, you know, one of these other headlines to say that, well, Russia's really fighting in Ukraine, but here they're just doing weird hybrid stuff to us because they're really our enemy. That's obviously intended to create a domestic perception in Bulgaria along certain lines. I'll leave that to you. Let's jump to another country. Let's take a look at Moldova. I'm not looking. Let me just really quickly. I should do this. Hang on. Before we look at Moldova, I didn't want to look at Romania, but I should at least do a quick scan of the headlines to see if there's any big deal. But Romania, just from everything I've seen, is absolutely in the pocket of Romania. They've dumped the West, NATO, the EU has dumped too much money into keeping it under control. So yeah, Romania is going to buy a bunch of fucking Turkish drones, which is probably another way of saying it's going to buy them and give them to Ukraine. Let's just be honest. Spain is calling on Austria to unblock Romania's accession to the Schengen zone. So yeah, as I guessed, I would imagine that Romania is still very much under the thumb. Oh, fuck off. Who cares? This is bullshit. Yeah, as I expected, Romania is still entirely under the thumb and increasingly under the thumb of the EU. It's very much going to be a part of that picture. So we don't need to imagine anything has changed there before we go look at Moldova. So yes. So here we're again going to scan these headlines, you know, just to take a look at them. As I said, it can often give you a picture of what's happening. Moldova leader accuses Russia of meddling ahead of regional vote. We're going to look more closely at that. It's a Turkic tribe in a particular region of Moldova. They've got some sort of election coming up or vote. Russia bans Moldovan MPs and minister and expels diplomat. Russia expels Moldovan diplomat. EU to deploy mission to Moldova to combat threats from Russia. Remember what I said about, you know, every fucking spook that they can get to be boots on the ground is headed that way. Moldova joins group pushing for creation of special tribunal for Russian crimes. Moldova, end of the experiment of Moldova being a separate country from Romania. I mean, Ukraine's foreign minister arrives in Moldova, right? Putin's agents in Moldova have nothing to lose and won't stop until they're forced. So as regards Moldova, it should be very, very clear to everyone here that shit is heating up there big time. Obviously, Transnistria is a part of that. Historically, Russia controlled much of Moldova in the form of what was previously called Bessarabia. So I don't expect Russia to disappear from Moldova quietly. I think they're going to do everything within their power to maintain some kind of position there, not least as regards Transnistria. And the aspect that if they have Transnistria, they've got access to Moldova and leverage on Moldova. If they have leverage on Moldova, Moldova is a riparian state along the Danube, which means by extension, Russia will get its fingers a bit into the politics and decision-making surrounding the Danube. People who've watched my previous streams should know how critical that river is for infrastructure, particularly from things coming from the East Balkans and from the Black Sea littoral. So let's take a look at this first one here, just to review what is going on in Moldova. Putin's agents in Moldova have nothing to lose and won't stop until they're forced. Exclusive. A Moldavian MP has cautioned that pro-Russian saboteurs working in Moldova will continue to disrupt the government until every available recruit has been used. This weekend, Moldova expressed concern after Russian soldiers stationed in the unrecognized breakaway region of Transnistria performed military operations without Chisinau's, Moldova's capital's, approval. It is just one in a number of events that have worried authorities in Moldova as Russia looks to expand its influence inside the former Soviet state. So now Express UK has been told by a sitting MP from the country that spies and saboteurs backed by pro-Vladimir Putin forces are throwing everything they have at destabilizing what has become a functioning Western-oriented democracy. That's allow me to, I'm just going to go ahead and put my whole face here so you can see me go at the idea that fucking Moldova is a functioning Western-style democracy. That's a fucking joke that you could only expect from a UK journalist. Anyway, I'm going to bring the screen back. Sorry for the noise. Let's take a look. Before we get to end, there we go. Along these lines, you can wonder why the UK was putting this kind of information out there. Well, we see Politico coming from the United States trying to, sing the same song. They have to justify the fact that they're sending in all kinds of spooks and security people to make sure that their people stay in power. Elections be damned. Now, I'm not trying to pretend that Russia's not doing the same thing. I just think we're all grown-ups here, right? All of us are grown-ups. And as grown-ups, it behooves us to just go ahead and acknowledge publicly that everyone in the fucking country's crooked. Everyone trying to influence things there is crooked. The fucking Russians are in there crookedly trying to do shit. The pro-Russian Moldovians are trying to do shit. The pro-Western Moldovians are trying to do shit. The crooked-ass fucking NATO and US and EU operatives are in there. The idea that anybody is the truly democratic one is so laughable that that anyone who fucking asserts it should just be laughed out of town or tarred and feathered and run out on a rail. So let's look at this article. It says that EU to deploy mission to Moldova to combat threats from Russia. Brussels is stepping in after intelligence agencies warned Moscow's agents are planning to sow chaos in the country. The EU will send a civilian civilian, right? Jogger, please. The EU will send a civilian mission to Moldova to help the Eastern European nation combat growing threats from abroad, officials have confirmed, following a string of reports that the Kremlin is working to destabilize the former Soviet republic. In a statement issued Monday, the bloc's top diplomat, Josip Borrell, said that the mission under the Common Security and Defense Policy, the Common Security and Defense Policy is sending a civilian mission. The Common Security and Defense Policy is just sending a civilian mission. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. Is sending a civilian mission to support Moldova to protect its security, territorial integrity, and sovereignty against Russia. Officials confirm that the mission will focus on crisis management and hybrid threats, including cybersecurity and countering foreign information manipulation and interference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. All right. Well, we don't have to spend too much time on that. Instead, let's take a look at this upcoming election. It's happening on April 30th. Election in Gagauzia, Gagauz, I'm guessing. Gagauzia has potential to undermine Moldova's stability, this beacon of enlightened democracy. Victory by one of the pro-Russian candidates in the restive territory that leans toward Moscow would add to the pro-EU government's woes. On April 30th, citizens of the autonomous territorial unit of Gagauzia in southern Moldova will head to the polls to elect a new governor, known locally as the Başkan. Of course, this is all Turkish. Başkan's a Turkish word, right? The governor is elected for a 5-year term and serves as the head of Gagauzia's executive branch, as well as being an ex officio member of the Moldovan cabinet. 8 candidates are competing for the coveted office. As it stands, there are 3 forerunners: Dmitry Kroitor, Viktor Petrov, and Evgenia Hutsul. Kroitor is the most moderate and experienced. We can tell who Balkan Insight wants everyone to vote for. And then there is the Gagauz, or Turkic ethnic group. We'll get into that in a minute. Up. I can't read more of it because it has a subscription. But don't worry, I've got more information on this. First, let's have a look at Gagauzia. So, the Gagauz, it's an autonomous territorial unit. If you want to see, it's this region, right? Which is interesting because it's not tied to this area right here is Transnistria, right? But here are the Gagauz, right? And that puts them closer to the Danube, which, if I remember correctly, runs right along here. Or is it here and it goes in? I can't remember. No, Moldova only touches the Danube, I think, right here, if I'm remembering right. Anyway, so that puts them closer to the Danube too, which is quite interesting. Anyway, who are they? The beginnings or origins of the Gagauz are obscure. There are a bunch of theories about them. They're clearly Turkic, and they ended up there. They were under the Russian Empire after they annexed part of the Ottoman Empire. What's interesting, though, is that the Gagauz have been pretty seriously pro-Soviet, and they tried to do their own thing for a little while. But when an independent Moldova appeared, Gagauzia in the referendum in 1991 returned an almost unanimous vote in favor of remaining part of the USSR. And Gagauzia wanted to declare itself an independent republic at the same time that Transnistria did. So the point here is that this is clearly a region that the Russians have maintained their contacts with, and they're likely to be pro-Russian. So let's come back to our headlines about Moldova. Moldova leader accuses Russia of meddling ahead of regional vote. Chisinau, April 27th, President Maya Sandu accused Russia on Thursday of meddling in Moldova's internal affairs, pointing to an election this weekend in the region of Gagauzia, where she said many of those running were Russian agents. Moldova barred a Russian regional delegation this week from going to the semi-autonomous pro-Russian region of Gagauzia, which will elect its head of government on Sunday. The delegation was led by Rustem Minikhanov, governor of Russia's Tatarstan region, who said it was regrettable he had been denied entry to Moldova's capital, Chisinau. So now, with this as a background, we can see why we're seeing headlines about how Putin's agents have nothing to lose, how the EU is going to deploy a special mission to Moldova. Clearly, they're worried about the results of this election, and all signs indicate that the EU and NATO powers are going to come in and stomp all over anyone in Gagauzia trying to be elected who is not pro-NATO and pro-EU. So the chances are high that there could be further destabilization there. Now, if I had to, I'm no expert on this. I'm not an expert of any kind. I'm just fucking guessing, and all of you can see that I'm just scanning headlines and fucking Wikipedia articles. So don't think of me as some kind of authority on this. But I think it's perfectly believable that people in Gagauzia actually do want closer and better relations with Russia. I think that's entirely likely, if not possible. And I think there are probably good chances that if they're going to if Russia is going to be able to work with groups inside of Transnistria, inside Moldova that are not Transnistria, then it's entirely possible that maybe they could swing it, so that despite all of the NATO money being pushed into this, and despite all the US spooks and EU people and all the rest getting involved, maybe they still can come out ahead with their candidate. The Russians can come out ahead with the pro-Russian candidate in Gagauzia, which would cause destabilization. But I think two things. Number one, it's less likely that'll happen because we've seen everywhere that the EU, the United States, Britain, they all just shit all over elections. They do not give a damn. They will do anything, no matter how brazen, to see that they go their way. So it's more likely that a pro-EU, pro-Chisinau candidate will be elected. And even if the pro-Russian candidate were elected, I could totally see where Romania and the EU get involved and they lock down the whole area and they declare that the elections weren't valid. So bear this in mind. And so there are multiple ways that the election there could destabilize Moldova, because if the people there really do lean much more towards Russia and they really do vote in this way, they're going to know that there was all kinds of crooked shit going on. And then you're going to see further Moldovan destabilization. So keep an eye on Moldova. Just quickly to review the headline here: the citizens of Gagauzia are preparing to elect their next governor. A victory of one of the many pro-Russian candidates could destabilize Moldova and derail its EU aspirations. Let me see if there's anything here that's just, yeah, people are hungry. They got inflation. They got energy problems. They got bills. But the rest of this all seems like details. It's not as though they're going to say, yes, well, we're all wondering what would happen if, in fact, we really did push the EU's angle there and we fixed the election. You're not going to see that. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. That covers Moldova. Let's jump ahead to the next one. Here we have Georgia. Right. And now what's interesting when you start taking a look at the headlines from Georgia, we've just reviewed why it's important to look at what's going on in Georgia, right? Because it's an energy corridor. And of course, Georgia it's the South Caucasus. We saw in 2008 that Russia is very willing to assert itself in South Ossetia to control the year-round to either directly or control from nearby both the old Georgian military highway and the main north-south highway through the Caucasus that remains open year-round. That all either runs right next to South Ossetia or through South Ossetia. And of course, as I've discussed many times on my channel, the Caucasus is like the southern fortress wall of Russia. So what's going on there is that it's absolutely part of Russia's security interests since at least the days of Catherine the Great to maintain that like a southern wall, which means they can't have, from a Russian perspective, in their view, they can't have Georgia running off to join the European Union. They simply cannot have it. Likewise, they don't want it going on with Azerbaijan, but they haven't been able to control that thus far. They don't want it with Armenia. But again, that area is a transit corridor for gas. I should just say more broadly for energy. And it's also very important because it's the southern fortress wall of Russia in its view, right? Part of the same chain of defenses that you see with, Sevastopol and the rest, and a Caspian fleet to whatever extent there is one. So looking at what's going on in Georgia, I need to talk to somebody from Georgia who knows their shit about this, because there's only a certain amount that I can track. However, the general picture seems to be this. I think we're seeing, again, there's a situation similar to Bulgaria where there's a kind of stalemate. And that stalemate is the result of a struggle on the ground to where neither of the two competing coalitions can come out completely on top. And it really is that to some extent. But I think it suits everyone else not to move from their position and to just keep it locked, to keep it frozen for the time being until they see what happens with Russia in Ukraine and the rest, so that they don't, back a loser and end up, with their bones bleaching in the sun as a result. That said, if we look at these headlines, we can see a whole bunch of them that are from Agenda GE. Let's just take a quick look here to see what kind of shit rag this is, what kind of yellow journalism shit rag this is. Does Home tell us about us? Where's the about us? Does it tell us about us, who we are? About. It's just absolutely going to be a fucking Western shit rag shill yellow journalism thing. There's just no way around it. Why is nothing coming up? Always so interesting when you click on about and nothing comes up. I think that pretty much says it. Agenda English language news platform for people who don't speak Georgian but want to know the country better. Yeah. So this is basically a way to get news about Georgia out to the West, which means the editorial angle on it should be clear. And if we jump back to it, yeah. Bilateral relations, EU integration, and focus meeting between Georgian and Polish, Georgian Prime Minister, Polish financial minister. So yeah, we can see here that this is, I mean, if they're talking about great visits from Poland, then what we can see here certainly is Prometheanism as a general strategy, turning all of these countries that were formerly within the influence sphere of Russia against Russia in order to advance Western goals. And we see that with all these headlines. Poland's support for Georgia's independence, Euro-Atlantic aspirations, that's what they like to call it, Euro-Atlantic. The importance of Poland's support for the country's Euro-Atlantic integration. So right here, we can see one face of Georgia. This is what they want to put out there as English language headlines. And all they do is praise the aspirations of Georgia joining NATO. But if we go back over here, this is why I say I need to talk to somebody who's actually in Georgia, because some of this can be hard to pick apart, right? This is from, April 6th. It's a ways back, but it says Russia is winning in Georgia. America needs to get tough on Tbilisi. Now, maybe this is just a situation where they exaggerate Russian influence there in order to justify pouring in more of theirs. As the United States and its NATO allies are focused on Russian President Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, like it's all Vladimir Putin who did it. Like just that fucking sentence. By the way, let me just stop here and tell you how fucking much I hate journalists. Just it drips fucking sleaze as the United States and its NATO allies are focused on Vladimir Putin's war. It's his war. Fuck off, man. Russia's efforts to bring another country into its orbit has gone largely unnoticed. Russia's efforts? No, it should be Russia's efforts have gone. Or Russia's effort has... I can't even fucking write, cunt. Like many countries that were once part of the Soviet Union, Georgia has a population that is largely pro-EU and pro-NATO, an orientation that has only been strengthened in the years since Moscow's 2008 invasion of the country, which left Russia occupying some 20% of its territory. Yet Georgia's current leaders have not only failed to support Ukraine in its own struggle against Russian aggression, and I'm not going to subscribe to read the rest of it, but you can get the sense here that everything is not going quite as they want it to. And sometime back, we saw discussion of, the different countries that could possibly get into NATO and the EU next. And it was a very pointed mention at that time, if I'm remembering correctly, and I believe I am, that countries that had been waiting for quite some time in order to get into the EU were pushed back onto the back burner, Georgia among them, because they just weren't democratic enough, according to the EU. And they just had so many more reforms to do. They just couldn't quite be let in yet. They're just going to have to make the hard decisions and, do what's necessary to make it happen. However, Moldova, which, I mean, forgive me, Moldovan, peoples who are cool. It's a backwater Balkan shithole. And Moldova was pushed straight forward for accession very, very quickly, and Georgia was told to hang back, which suggests to me, alongside articles like this one, that Georgia still remains in question, and that whether or not Georgia goes with the West or with Russia depends in very large part on the issue, on the outcome of the war between the West and Russia that is taking place through the civil war currently going on in Ukraine. Now, if we take a look, we've got other things, that again suggest that some people say confidently that Georgia is absolutely pro-Western and they just want to get into NATO and the EU, and that's all their people want to do. That's all they're interested in doing. But again, we see these articles like the other one saying Russia's winning there, and now we see who's running Georgia. Perhaps the biggest question is why the government would pursue such an unpopular pro-Russia policy. Now, this is opinion piece, but it's from, yesterday. This Arshan Barzani is a student at Yale Law School. It says it's impossible to go very far in Georgia without seeing a Ukrainian flag. Blue and yellow decks out email signatures and hotel bills, the menus of cheap Tbilisi wine bars, and the walls of rural huts. Rude graffiti calls for Russian vacationers to pack their bags, while a placard on a restaurant door bans fans of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russia conquered 1 in 5, 20% of Georgia in a 5-day war in 2008 and still holds these lands. With troops stationed just an hour's drive from the capital. That war turned out to be only the first in Russia's revanchist trilogy, followed by the annexation of Crimea, now ongoing war in Ukraine. Interesting that they didn't mention Abkhazia as well. Small wonder then that 9 in 10 Georgians back Ukraine and view Russia as a major threat. 90% of Georgia backs Ukraine. Okay. But the ruling Georgian Dream Party currently refuses to sanction Russia or arm Ukraine. It has blocked Georgians from joining the 1,000-strong Georgian National Legion in Ukraine. Has it really, though? Georgian National Legion is all over the joint. We'll see a headline about that. And it has kept Putin's critics from re-entering the country. Meanwhile, Georgia itself has turned into a hub for sanctioned goods, sneaking their way on the old military highway to Russia. So I think part of the explanation here, obviously, is where they mentioned that Russia has troops stationed in South Ossetia that are just an hour's drive from Tbilisi. That would explain why they were careful about things, right? So I don't know. I would want to talk to somebody from Georgia to find out whether or not that 90% want to go with the West is really true. On its face, I'd say it's probably bullshit. However, I would imagine also that nevertheless, it's probably safely the majority of Georgians who want to go with the West rather than Russia. The question is whether or not that can actually happen. And again, I believe that they're waiting on things to develop in Ukraine one way or another before they, arrive at any kind of final conclusion about this or commit themselves to it. Now, that is not to say that the West is not going to be all over it, absolutely pouring. Fucking poison ivy. I cannot. I want to scratch it. I can't scratch it. They're going to wait to see what happens in Ukraine first. And then they'll go from there. But the spooks and the rest from the West are pouring money and influence to try to push as much as they can right now while Russia is focused over on Ukraine. See, part of how the strategists in the West, such as they are, would justify the war in Ukraine, even if it fails. They can say, well, if it does fail, but we've shown all of the European Union that Russia is an enemy. We've strengthened NATO. We've pushed inroads into Kazakhstan and Georgia, and we've seized Moldova, and we've eventually settled Transnistria. Even if Russia does take, back these 4 territories that it's claimed as its own, we can still count it as a win if we destabilize Georgia and bring it online, and we open up the Lachin corridor with Armenia, and we get all of that ahead, then it won't be a total loss, right? So that's part of why they're pushing very, very hard right now in places like Moldova, in places like Georgia, in places like Armenia, to get their way while they imagine that Russia is distracted. And to a certain extent, I think it's fair to say, simply because a certain amount of attention has to go to that war, that Russia is in some respect distracted. I don't know distracted is really the word, but I think it is safe to say that they do have to focus on other things with their primary attention, which leaves less of that available for countries like Georgia and Armenia. But I don't believe that that means that they're not doing anything there. So quickly, let's look at Abkhazia. Most of you won't know about this, but when we're looking at, Georgia and the Caucasus in general, it's important to take a look at Abkhazia. It's an area that Georgia claims. They're very, very, very close relatives of what we call Circassians. They speak a language that is, in some respects, almost mutually intelligible or mutually intelligible to a certain extent. And they were historically enemies of the Russians, but Russia turned around in the 90s, 2000, somewhere in 90s, and then more recently also in the 2000s, has been backing Abkhazia, but nobody recognizes them except really Russia. There may be just a couple of other countries. And like South Ossetia, Georgia would very much like to get this territory back. So I just take a look at it to see what's going on. This is very much a pro-Western journal. They're just talking about how in Abkhazia, which doesn't really matter. Again, it's not that important. It's very tiny. It only exists because of support from Russia. Georgia would roll back in to take it or try immediately. I mean, the Abkhazians fought more or less alone and fairly successfully against the Georgians once upon a time. But Georgia, backed by the West, would roll over Abkhazia pretty quickly, I'm sorry to say. Basically, you've got opposition being funded in Abkhazia that's saying that the government there has to reject Russia. Now, bear in mind, Russia is the only country that even recognized the existence of Abkhazia. So, really, what are the quote unquote opposition in Abkhazia all about? Now, I don't know enough about this. I know one guy on Twitter who knows quite a bit about Abkhazia, maybe even is an Abkhaz. Perhaps I can talk to him about it at some point. But again, I need somebody from Georgia. I need somebody from Abkhazia, even South and North Ossetians to come in to give me a better understanding of what's really going on there. Everything that we get out of these kind of Western news sources. I mean, you can almost guarantee that because it's in English about these places, any given news source is going to be shite, right? You can look at JAM News, which they're wank happy stories about Azerbaijan putting checkpoints on the Lachin Road for the Lachin corridor. Stoltenberg saying that Georgia's lagging behind, so it needs more democracy. You could clearly see what's happening here with this news source. So anyway, the point is that they're putting pressure even in places like Abkhazia. Next, do we want to do this one next? Let's look at Kazakhstan really quickly first. No, I missed Kazakhstan. Before we get to Serbia, I need to look at Kazakhstan. Where did I miss it? Armenia? Oh yeah, I missed a bunch of shit. Okay, first off, Kazakhstan, right? This is important. Let's go back to this. Where did the map go? Right? Kazakhstan's over here, right? And there was a thing within the last year or so, year and a half, where there was some sort of attempted coup over there, and Russia sent rapid reaction forces, and they tried to pin that down. But Kazakhstan is increasingly taking a position of saying that it really is an independent country. It's not just a plaything of Russia. It's in Russia's best interest not to antagonize Kazakhstan because they've been getting along fairly well. They've got a large Russian minority in the north. But anyway, Kazakhstan likewise has been doing quite a bit with China as well. So neither China nor Russia want any kind of fucking around going on with Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan is permitted a certain amount of leeway because of that. And Russia absolutely does not need a problem in Kazakhstan right now. So in the same ways that the West is going after Georgia and Azerbaijan, it's also trying to put lots of pressure on Kazakhstan to become a part of this whole pipeline and energy delivery system. And they could do that by putting together tankers, crossing over to Baku and getting it into this pipeline system so that it'll travel over to the Western Balkans. So if we take a look at what's going on with Kazakhstan, remember it's right over here on the other side of the Caspian. It's a big ass country, one of the biggest ones from the former Soviet Union. There we are. Let's look at a couple of the headlines. Wait a minute. Did I get lost again? There it is. Okay. So yeah, one of them here is Kazakhstan has Kazakhstan become more democratic following recent elections. So that's basically, I was saying that we have to come back to the topic of Kazakhstan later, because what we're dealing with there, we can't figure out what's going on there until we see how the elections turned out. So those elections did happen in March, and basically Tokayev, who was the guy previously in power, who survived the coup as well, he's still there. The country remains, as they say here, the country remains far from a liberal democracy, and the division of powers is significantly slanted in the president's favor. But the role of parliament has changed to embody Tokayev's principle of different opinions, a unified nation. The legislative body, previously little more than a rubber stamp, is becoming an arena for discussion and even sometimes criticism of the authorities, albeit controlled criticisms. So what we can see here is that Tokayev remains in control. And so now they had this, so broad constitutional reforms were carried out. Then a snap presidential election was held, keeping Tokayev legitimate. And then they had these parliamentary elections. The electoral legislation was loosened. A mixed system was used, blah, 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 blah. Registration of new party threshold, unprecedented competition, 250 candidates for 5 seats in 2 capitals. Anyway, the point is, this looks to me like a massive facelift to make it seem more Western, but the people, Tokayev in any case, who were in control remain in control. So the political reforms apparently are superficial, which makes sense because none of these people are interested in democracy. They like Khans, they like great men. They think Stalin was great. They're sad that he's no longer around. Generally, if you speak to people in the countryside, this is not a country, like this is a country that believes in the Genghis Khan style of settling questions, literally. So the Western hopes that things would work out there are premature, have been spoiled to a considerable extent. But now let's look there. Well, no, first I should look at the sanctions. Sorry. Where is it? Yes, Kazakhstan spooked by U.S. warning of secondary sanctions. Oh, come on now. Why is this so slow? At least one leading financial services company is cutting back its exposure to Russian nationals. Only one day after a senior U.S. government official warned that companies and banks in Kazakhstan could face sanctions if found to be aiding Russia to circumvent sanctions, a leading financial institution has announced it will restrict its dealings with Russia and Belarusian nationals. Okay, so first off, they want to tell a story about how the U.S. is putting pressure on Kazakhstan to make things happen. And they've got one financial institution that says it will restrict it, and it's Halleck Finance. Who even knows? I don't even know how important they are, right? But the point is that the West is going after Kazakhstan hard in order to make sure that, what do they say down here? They don't want Russia getting hold of things like computer chips, as well as elements used in integrated electronic systems for missiles and drones. We're not talking about iPhones or washing machines. We're talking about specific items of computer technology. Anyway, so the U.S. is going in and trying to put all kinds of pressure on Kazakhstan to say that they shouldn't be doing business with Russia. We'll be watching them, and there'll be punishment and problems, if they get out of line. Sorry, I got too many of these damn things. There we are. So that's one thing going on. Basically, the picture is, well, let me throw in the last thing and then I'll summarize this tanker fleet thing, right? Kazakhstan building up Caspian tanker fleet to bypass Russia. In an aim to make itself more independent of Russia, Kazakhstan is rapidly expanding its fleet of oil tankers so it can ship more oil across the Caspian to Azerbaijan and then onward to the west via the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, rather than using mostly Russian routes as currently constituted. Now, this is just another move to show, I believe this is just another move by Kazakhstan to show that it's exploring these things. It could build up its tanker fleet and thereby, as they said, head across here, or I guess from up here, head across to Baku, and then put it in the pipeline, and that would get more gas flowing through here, more resources to funnel into Western Balkans and onwards into Italy and the rest of Europe. And Kazakhstan is saying, yeah, we'll flirt with this idea, but look at the reality. Russia controls the Caspian and Iran. Iran produces energy. Russia produces energy. Iran and Russia are both under pressure from the West. Do you think that they're going to allow tanker fleets to just, roll through here and roll through pipelines starting in Azerbaijan? I mean, the whole Kazakh thing could be blocked even before it gets to, Georgia and the rest. So it's not going to be in Russia's interest or in Iran's interest to allow this to go on. And they can bring all kinds of pressure of various kinds to bear on Kazakhstan. There is one little thing here. Where is it? Kazakhstan. Yeah. See, you get little peeps like this. Now, this is probably not Russia so much doing this. Well, maybe it is Russia just sending a polite signal, but definitely it's the kind of thing that the West would seize upon in order to continue to paint a picture of Russia as being, a lawless, tyrannical thing. But there's a Russian journalist has suggested that Moscow has the historical right to Kazakhstan, a former Soviet republic that gained independence in 1991. Dmitry Steshin, a correspondent with the Kremlin-friendly tabloid Komsomolskaya Pravda, was asked in an interview on the outlet's radio station about comparisons between Ukraine and Kazakhstan. The situation in Ukraine is being mirrored clearly in Kazakhstan. There are enormous regions populated by Russian speakers there too, said Steshin in a clip tweeted by Francis Scar, BBC. Right. So this is some guy running his mouth who works for a newspaper that's said to be friendly with the Kremlin. And he just peeped something on a radio program, and then the BBC picked it up. And it's probably designed to inflame tensions between Kazakhstan and Russia. I think Russia doesn't want problems with Kazakhstan of this sort, but it's probably not an accident that a little hint, just a hint, that other problems could appear, that we might be forced to make you an offer you can't refuse. Like, a hint might have been made along those lines. But I think at this point, Kazakhstan, they know where their bread's buttered. There's plenty of money to be made. And there's equal interest in Kazakhstan on the part of Russia and of China at this point. So they wouldn't want destabilization and trouble. I would expect for the time being that Tokayev knows how to walk a line between Russia and China and the West. He's going to appear to be moving towards the West in certain respects, to be able to give them polite answers when they come to try to harangue him and put pressure on him. But I think he's buying time like everybody else, waiting to see what the outcome of what's going on, the outcome of what's going on in Ukraine turns out to be. So I don't think you're going to see anything where Russia, invades Kazakhstan. I don't think they need to. But that's that. So now we have Armenia. Basically, I don't know a whole lot about what's going on in Armenia, but Azerbaijan recently went and seized a bunch of disputed territory that Armenia had been holding. All this stuff related with the Lachin corridor and Nagorno-Karabakh. And the Azeris have been backed by the Israelis and the Turks and have been cleaning Armenia's clock in large part. It's not like Armenia is a big country with a lot of resources of its own in any case, but they did not turn out, on top after their last tussle. Armenia did not turn out on top after their last tussle with Azerbaijan, and they're really in a bad position. So again, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I can see, the leader in Armenia has been very, very openly flirting with the West and saying, yeah, maybe we do just need to get on board with you. Yeah, maybe Russia isn't really as powerful here anymore and isn't the real, decisive party here in terms of how our future is going to end up. You know, maybe you're beginning to sing a song that I understand in certain respects, you know. While at the same time, the same leader was heading to Moscow and constantly saying, we need help from Russia. We need help from Russia, right? Russia seems to be distracted. Please help us. Your peacekeepers here aren't doing enough. Well, there is now a new peacekeeping head in Nagorno-Karabakh sent in by Russia. So Russia is now paying attention. And even though the stuff is going on in Ukraine, they know they have to do something down here in Armenia. So Russia has appointed a new head of its peacekeeping force in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region as tensions remain high between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the Lachin corridor, the only road connecting the mostly Armenian populated region with Armenia. So where does that put us here? I'm guessing, let me just make sure. Let me not get this wrong. I believe it's a little image. Give me an image, you fuckers. So the Lachin corridor. Why is it not showing? I want to see, make it obvious to someone like me. Yes. Lachin corridor policed by Russian peacekeepers. Right. So if we go back to our pipeline diagram here, where is it? Yeah. So the Lachin corridor is basically, is it here or is it here? What the fuck? What the fuck? From Stepan Kut. So yeah, let me go back here. That would put it. What the hell is going on? That's yeah, I guess it's right around here. Or God damn it. I need to understand this properly, and I do not understand it properly. Why is this visually so difficult for me to understand? Okay, the Lachin corridor is right there. Okay, and that's Nagorno. Okay, that's the problem, is this map refuses to recognize. Right, that's a part of Azerbaijan. Okay, that's the other confusing thing. Zangezur corridor. So there's a Lachin corridor and a Zangezur corridor. That's why I'm fucking up here, right? So this is the Zangezur that Iran's concerned about, and the Lachin one is basically right up in. Oh shit! You can't see my mouse. This is the Zangezur corridor, and the Lachin corridor is right about here. So. Lachin one would allow Azerbaijan to connect if it can cut across Armenia here. Anyway, Armenia's in a, sorry, I just wasted a huge amount of time trying to figure out this shit that I wasn't properly prepared for. So my apologies. Let me come back to Armenia. Basically, the issue is that Armenia is getting pushed into a corner and is having problems. And so they've been trying to get help from Russia while being a little bit coy about everything, acting as though they would also be willing to go in the direction of the West if they have to. The Russian Defense Ministry on April 26, so just yesterday, announced the appointment of Alexander Lentsov to replace Andrei Volkov without providing a reason. The announcement came hours after a telephone conversation between Vladimir Putin and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, during which the Lachin corridor and the humanitarian situation in Nagorno-Karabakh were discussed. A statement from the Russian Defense Ministry said the discussion between Putin and Pashinyan focused on resolving practical tasks to ensure stability and security in the region. It added that they confirmed the importance of observing previous agreements reached by Russia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And yeah, here they're talking about what I mentioned earlier. Armenia has voiced increasing frustration that the Russian peacekeeping force deployed in 2020 as part of a Russian-brokered ceasefire to end a 6-week war has failed to keep open the Lachin corridor. Tensions have flared in recent months over blockades on the road by government-backed Azerbaijani protesters, and the availability of food in Nagorno-Karabakh has become acute. I think what they mean to say is the lack of availability of food in Nagorno-Karabakh has become acute due to irregular deliveries. So it looks like Russia is saying, we're not out of here. We're not gone yet. It looks like they have responded to pressure from Armenia to get in there and help in some fashion. Let's see what Reuters has to say about this. The same article. Who is our previous one? Our previous one was Radio Free Europe. So that's going to be very pro-West. This one also is going to be pro-Res. Russia names new peacekeeping head as tensions rise between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Russia said Wednesday it had appointed one of its most senior army commanders to lead a peacekeeping force in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. Russian peace, blah, blah, blah. We already know about that. The new leader is in charge. No reason was given. Armenia has been frustrated. Okay, so yeah, we're going to have to wait to see what happens there. But apparently Russia is saying we're not going to completely ignore you. That's all I see here thus far. Last one is in the Moscow Times. Armenia urges Moscow peacekeepers to keep vital road under control. Armenia said on Thursday that Russian peacekeepers should have full control of the only land link between its territory and the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. On Thursday, French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna held talks in Baku on easing tensions in the South Caucasus. After visiting Azerbaijan, Colonna traveled to Armenia. Yeah, that sounds like the French traveled there to say, look, we have to have gas come through here. Fuck Russia. Armenia, get on board or we're going to sick the Azerbaijanis on you. I mean, that's, if I had to guess, that's what was discussed. Let's see here. Russian peacekeepers must keep the Lachin corridor under control and ensure the operation of the corridor, Pashinyan said at a government meeting. No one but Russia has a right to control the corridor. Yeah, so they're just barking at each other, Armenia and Azerbaijan. And Moscow has basically said, look, we didn't forget about you. Sorry, it took us a little while to respond to your call, but we're sending a new general. Presumably he has some modification or some underlines marked on his marching orders. So we'll see what happens with that. We already talked about Abkhazia. So yeah, the last one is Serbia. And then we'll wrap this up. This is very long. I'm sorry, but there are a bunch of these countries that I wanted to cover that were related to all of this. And yeah, it just takes some time to cover them. Well, you have to understand the importance of the Danube in order to understand the importance of Serbia. You also have to understand that Serbia is like the last of these potential spots well, closer to Europe proper, where Russia had influence, and they've been getting driven out. You know, I was talking before about how Montenegro seems to be going increasingly over to the west, and that means that Montenegro effectively blocks Serbia from having access to the Adriatic, and that means that shit's getting worse for Serbia. So I just wanted to check in there. The election happened in Montenegro. Let me just see what it says here. Best I could tell, see, this is where I need to get a Montenegrin. I need to get a Serbian in here who understand what's going on there. As best I can tell, the guy who was elected in Montenegro basically well, let's see here. Djukanovic was defeated. So let's look at the elections. We need to see. Yeah, so Djukanovic loses. Yeah, let's see how the West talks about the guy who was hired. And that'll tell us whether or not he's a suck boy. So Reuters is a perfect example. I mean, looking at him, he looks, let me make this bigger. Looking at him, he certainly looks like a suck boy. Montenegro's ex-economy minister Milatovic declares victory in presidential runoff. Montenegro's Jakov Milatovic declared victory. Incumbent Milo Djukanovic was booted out. Western-educated Milatovic, the deputy head of the Europe Now movement, campaigned on pledges to curb graft, include improved living standards, and bolster ties with the European Union. Yeah, so he's, unless he's somebody crypto clever, as young as he is, and from everything I'm reading about him, he looks like a total NATO EU suckboy, which suggests that Serbia has now been even more thoroughly cut off from Adriatic access. So if we cruise back here to Serbia, what do we have? Kosovo demanding the EU condemn Serbia's breach of an international agreement. That's from yesterday. Is that? No, let's see what that one says. That's from yesterday, Euro News. Barely a month after what was hailed as a breakthrough moment in the strained relationship between Kosovo and Serbia, the EU brokered agreement between the two appears to have run into trouble. Kosovo has accused Serbia of violating the agreement by voting against its Council of Europe membership, according to the deal and its implementation mechanisms approved on the 18th of March. Serbia will not obstruct Kosovo's entry into the international organizations. So Serbia said it wasn't going to block Kosovo, and now apparently it did. Apparently, Vučić is saying that Kosovo has to meet its obligations first. He says there's no game around this. You will fulfill your side of the deal. And once you do that, then we will fulfill our side. So that looks like Serbia is buying time. It's been blocked in Montenegro. The election didn't go well. The EU is ascendant in its machinations against Serbia. Or from a pro-Russian Serbian's perspective, or from a Russian perspective, the EU is now ascendant in Serbia. So Serbia is running out of time and is trying to maneuver in some fashion to buy more time. I think this is less about Vučić being worried so much about what Russia will think, but dealing with his own domestic population of people who think that Kosovo should take a flying fuck at a rolling donut. But yeah, things look rough in Serbia, and the EU seems, I mean, that might be a thing there, that like one of the things, okay, we didn't win in Ukraine, but they can come back and they can say, but we finally taken care of Montenegro and boxed in Serbia and conclusively pushed out Russian influence there. That's probably a thing that they are going for. We don't know how all that's gonna shake out. It doesn't look good though. You know, Serbia disappointed with Ukraine, Greece, Slovakia over Council of Europe Kosovo vote. So yeah, Serbia is pissed off because Ukraine, Greece, and Slovakia have said that Kosovo should be able to join this Strasbourg-based international human rights body, the Council of Europe. Yeah, this is minor stuff, but it shows that Serbia is backed in to a corner. However, we do see here from foreign policy, Serbia is taking a page out of Russia's book. Before being ousted in Montenegro's presidential runoff election on April 2nd, incumbent President Milo Đukanović sounded the alarm about a revival of Serbian efforts to establish a Serbian world in the Balkans. I don't see what this just looks like a bunch of this just looks like a Serbia smear piece written because Serbia is not doing everything that they've been told. They seem to be backed into a corner and to have very limited possibilities available to them. Okay, sorry, that's the primary review. Let me jump back up here. I'm not going to do a Q&A here because this has run for quite some time. As you can see, I'm weak in some of these areas because I cannot speak to locals, you know, and people from the region. If you are a Serbian or a Montenegrin or a Bulgarian or a Georgian or a Armenian, you know, any of these countries that we've talked about, and you follow news and events there very closely, and you're not just a slobbering NATO shill, then, you know, get in touch. Maybe I can do some kind of group stream to have people from these countries talk to me about what's going on there. Yeah, but otherwise, thanks everyone for joining. I see Zed Dez is in the house. I didn't see her earlier. Happy to see her. Glad she's here as a moderator. Thanks everyone for watching. Yeah, and I will be back soon. I think I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything soon here, and probably tomorrow night, with any luck, I'll be on a Friday Night Cocktail Space with my friend John D. Join me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, and you will see that going on. Those are great fun, and I look forward to one tomorrow night. Thanks again to everyone for watching. Yeah, and thanks to those who support the channel. I will be back before too long. Until then, I am Semiagog, and I am out. Ha!